While the GOP leadership salivates over the prospect of ripping healthcare away from those most in need in this nation, many are already facing the consequences of what the GOP has already done, particularly with the killing of Roe v. Wade. There's a study by the AP. More than 100 pregnant women in medical distress who sought help from emergency rooms were turned away or negligently treated just since 2022. Two women, one in Florida and one in Texas, were left to miscarry in public restrooms. In Arkansas, a woman went into septic shock and her fetus died after an emergency room sent her home. At least 4 other women with ectopic pregnancies had trouble getting treatment, including one in California who needed a blood transfusion after she sat for 9 hours in an emergency waiting room. And so that's a couple of like case studies of that. But remember, that's more than 100 people that have been profiled just by this AP study in the states that actually track this. And every individual one of those is a tragedy. Every one of those is the worst thing possibly that's ever happened to these people. And it was made possible by both laws that have been passed and the involvement of right-wing justices and judges at a variety of levels. And so the Biden administration has tried to stop some of this. They have said that hospitals must offer abortions when needed to save a woman's life, despite state bans enacted after the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade 2 years ago. Texas is challenging that guidance, and earlier this summer, the Supreme Court declined to resolve the issue. And so you still have kind of like judicial chaos, where your ability to maybe survive a medical crisis could depend on where you actually are. And some of these states theoretically have, as I've alluded to, earlier in the show and ad nauseum throughout the year, have exceptions where, like if your health or your life is potentially on the line, they're supposed to give you access to reproductive health care like abortion. But the issue is that conclusively diagnosing an ectopic pregnancy, for instance, can be difficult. And I think that a lot of people, Danielle, who aren't doctors think you take a little machine, okay, and you wave it over like a pregnant woman's belly and it says her life is at risk. That's not how it actually works. Diagnoses are complicated. Sometimes you get things wrong. And if there's uncertainty, as the doctor, are you gonna err on the side of making the decision that could result in you being sued for tens of thousands of dollars and maybe thrown in prison for a few years? Like, no, you're gonna really wanna be sure, but that's not how medicine actually works. And so it's no wonder that we have this long trail of needless tragedies. That's kind of how the system was set up to function. What do you make of all this?
I mean, I think that it is really stark and horrible what has transpired in the medical profession and in the field since Roe v. Wade was overturned. These are not hypotheticals. These are real women's lives that have been ruined. These are people that wanted to become parents. And guess what? Now, because they've gone into septic shock or have had a traumatic miscarriage, are no longer going to be able to have children, right? And so I think that these politicians believe that how babies are made is somehow they are delivered by a stork to your front door, and there is no blood, there is no guts, and there is no damage that is involved. Meanwhile, what we all know to be true is that a woman is never closer to death than when giving birth. And if you tie doctors, hands behind their backs, then we're just gonna see more women losing their lives. We're already a country, right? An industrial nation that has become one of the most dangerous places for people to be pregnant. And if you are a Black woman, you are 1 in 5 times more likely, right, to lose your life in giving birth. Those are real numbers, and yet we're the quote unquote richest nation and an industrialized nation, and yet we have numbers of maternal mortality that could rival developing countries. And that makes absolutely no sense. And it's all because of politicians doing jobs that nobody hired them to do because they are not medical professionals.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you pointed that out because it's a tragedy that in some countries that don't have the medical technology or the training of the doctors that they have those outcomes. We don't have those things. We have choice. We have chosen to leave largely all women behind, but in particular Black women behind. And not just when it comes to pregnancy, health outcomes across a whole lot of different things are far worse. We've chosen to do that. And politicians have known about these disparities for many, many years. We've chosen to continue them. And so that should be utterly unacceptable. We can and should do better. And maybe, with another 8 years of Democrats being in charge and choosing another couple hundred judges at a variety of levels, maybe we can start to move in a better direction. But until then, you're just gonna have more and more of this needless, almost unimaginable tragedies. When you click the join button and become a tier 2 member, you get access to all of our weekly top 10 lists. What are you waiting for?